Alright, so I started getting into game development, and I don't really know what to do with this channel, so I'm going to upload my development blogs up here. The whole point of this is if you guys see something that I could be doing better, or doing something different, or you have any ideas or anything like that, you can post it up in the comments, give me some feedback, etc., etc. So, this video is just going to be my first, I guess, 2.5 weeks dabbling with game development. Enjoy! So after about a week of going over the game maker tutorial for RPGs, I had jumped in on March 23rd on Monday to try to start making my own game. But I didn't actually jump into Game Maker, I jumped into a Word document. I started a document for the first game I wanted to make. It was supposed to be a turn-based RPG with a lot of real-time mechanics, like dodging, parrying, and all of that stuff. The idea for the game, or the gameplay loop, was to use your defensive options as well as other battle systems to decrease your wait time and get to your turn quickly. The battles would incorporate puzzle mechanics as well. I've done some puzzle mechanics in my D&D games before. After typing roughly 6 to 7 pages of ideas for puzzles, mechanics, skills, equations, stats, conditions, and the like, it started to dawn on me that the size of the game was probably going to be too big for me to complete as my first game. Especially since I only had a few days of Game Maker experience and, just genuinely didn't know what I was doing. So, I decided that I just wanted to take the battle system of the RPG that I was making and try to make a mock battle for it. This wasn't my first interaction with coding. I had worked in both C and C++ back in college, and this wasn't even my first interaction with game design, as I homebrew in D&D, and I usually homebrew all of my enemies as well as the entire campaign. But as soon as I opened up that Game Maker worksheet, all of the stuff that I had spent the week before trying to learn had completely left my mind, which kind of gave me a clue to my learning style. Copying instructions, very easy. Implementing them for my own purposes, not so much. I took some time to implement some ridiculously basic code, simply putting a character on the screen, using the tutorials as a reference rather than copying them outright. This was just to test my understanding. You guys can meet Slicey, the stick samurai. I did very little work on Wednesday. I was just in my head thinking about how I was going to implement the battle systems, filter out through skills and everything like that, how the actual UI of the game was going to function, and I came to the conclusion that I would need to work on moving cursors around a grid for the battle system in my game. You see, in the game that I plan to make, the player would be placed against a grid filled with an assortment of enemies, the placer to select, and that would change the skills and everything that they could do. I really wanted to understand the cursor, and I did some coding that night, but not that much. No work on Friday. I dug my heels in and started working on the cursor. The goal was simple. Have an object move across the screen and interact with some other aspect of the game. I decided to have a circular cursor that destroys lines that it comes across, sort of like Pac-Man does with his dots. As I continued doing the code, I realized that this could justify as a game. Yeah, a pretty terrible one, but a game still nonetheless. And I had consumed a whole bunch of Game Guru content, and there was a specific video that told me all about how indie devs made a whole bunch of games before they decided to make their dream game. And they also told me not to make a YouTube DevBlog channel. But I have selective hearing. I decided to turn this circle, eating lines, into a small game just to see if I could make a game in a small amount of time. So, what's the gameplay loop? Basic idea is simple. You are a circle who needs to collect all of the straight lines before you can move on to the next stage. At first, I thought this would just be a silly story about a curvy circle with a hatred against those straight-sided shapes, and goes on a quest to destroy them all, but the framework of a universe like that didn't really make sense to me. And while I know that the entire game is a work of fiction, I enjoy worlds with a strong continuity. I'm gonna put this tangent to the side and just say you should search up storytelling cow tools. There's a video that talks about type 1 and type 2 writers, and I definitely lean far more towards type 1. My second idea was a nice little girl collecting energy in small pockets of space. It would be the end of the universe, Space has ripped apart, and this girl is tasked with collecting energy from pockets of space to concentrate it and start the next Big Bang. And I have a love, and more importantly, somewhat of an understanding of physics, so this idea was also very appealing to me. Now, I said I had off Friday, but that didn't make Friday any easier. It was pretty tough. I just slept. I had been up late most of the week, and I worked 10-hour shifts, so I did very little coding and lots of sleeping. Also realized how much dehydration could have a negative impact on your body. So after several bottles of water and a lot of sleep, I did little coding wise, but started listing out mechanics I want in the game and how I'm going to show those to the player. My goal for this week was to create a small set of stages teaching basic mechanics for the player, as well as making systems to create those stages in an easier manner. Saturday was the day that I decided I was going to actually do weekly dev blogs and start recording my screen. By this time, I had a framework for about 2 levels and a side counter, a thing that counted the number of sides on the screen. But I hadn't fully decided on whether or not I was going to make this game about the circles collecting shapes with sides or the lady collecting energy in space. What I did focus on today was making progress with levels and making creation a lot easier. For the sake of the video, I'm gonna say that I ultimately decided to drop the circles idea and go with the girl at the end of the universe who's collecting energy. I say this because what I say right now might not actually match what's going on in the video because I haven't changed any of the objects in GameMaker when I started recording. There were 4 mechanics that I wanted to focus on before the end of this week. Those 4 mechanics are goal, soft void, hard void, and the space loop. Now, I could just tell players what these things are, but in the spirit of making a puzzle game and trying to create intuitive game design, I'd rather show them and have them figure it out on their own. That way, the rules are more likely to stick. I also took the opportunity to design some tools around creating levels. I only wanted to place the start endpoints, the hard void, and the photons, which show up as lines in this video. Everything else I wanted the level to place automatically. We'll start with the mechanics. Goal. Right now, the goals are just the start and end points of the level. I decided to use a tile map layer to make these instead of objects. Essentially, I place the start and end tile in the game, and when the game boots, the player object just references all of the tiles until it finds the start and end tile, and then moves to the start tile automatically. The room also automatically creates all of the objects when it loads, and some of those objects are used for mechanics later that we'll be talking about. Next is the soft void. Any area in the room that can be accessed that doesn't have any photons or the start or end tile is called soft void, and players cannot stay in soft void because it kills them over time. Now, it'd be crazy of me to have to place soft void in every single level, especially if I decide to make bigger levels. So I made an object that just queries or checks all of the tiles in the game, and if it doesn't have a photon or a start or end tile on it, it just places a soft void there when the level starts. It also checks to make sure that there is a proton after the player has moved from a position, and if there isn't, it'll place a soft void after the player has moved from their position so that it continues to populate the room with soft void as you collect more of the stuff. Next is hard void, and this is just places where the player cannot go in the room. I want to be in control of placing hard void, so I just decided to make this a different tile layer and just control it myself. There's actually pretty basic and simple collision detection you can put between player instances and the tile layer, but I decided to make my own because my own has a pretty interesting exploit that I hope players will find and take advantage of. And last is the space loop. This is kind of easy. You just check the position of the player object, and if it's outside the bounds of the room, you teleport it where it needs to be in order for it to seem like it had wrapped around. I ultimately created levels that are supposed to teach players these mechanics. After teaching the player these 4 mechanics, I want to create more levels that test them on these 4 mechanics before we start introducing new mechanics into the game for them to have more fun with. So with those 4 levels done, I went back and changed up some of the variable names and changed up the data and all that stuff so it made sense with the mechanics of the game. And with the basics of the game put in place, I think it's time to get some more appealing graphics than circle, line, and poorly drawn words. I do have an ideal title for the game. It is called Photon Ria, where Ria is going to be the main character. And if you couldn't tell by my PNGs, I'm somewhat of an artist, so I would like to design Ria myself. However, I am no fool. I know I'll have to look up some free assets in the asset stores to get most of the graphics for the game, and that is exactly what I plan on doing. My goal for next week is to have at least a draft of Rhea to show you guys and actual graphics across the levels instead of just the circle, line, and grid and all that stuff. Okay, so thank you guys for watching and or listening. If you want to stay tuned for the rest of the journey, feel free to hit the subscribe button. I am going to get back to work. I will see you guys in the future.